Hey folks, David Glenn here from the North Carolina Sports Network with my three quick things on Duke's 54-51 victory over number one seed Houston in the Sweet 16 of the NCAA tournament as the Blue Devils join Clemson and NC State of the Atlantic Coast Conference in the Elite Eight. The Devils, of course, will face the neighborhood rival Wolfpack in the South Region Final on Sunday at 5:05 p.m. in Dallas, with the final spot in this year's Final Four on the line. Quick thing number one, Duke coach Jon Scheyer had to call a timeout just 1 minute and 36 seconds into this Houston game, with the Blue Devils trailing 6-0. A 6-point deficit may not sound like much in most circumstances, especially less than 2 minutes into a game. But Scheyer, in just his second year as a head coach, remember, might have already sensed that this was going to be a low-scoring game, one where anything larger than a 6 or 8 point deficit might be very difficult to overcome. If so, he was right. He also certainly knew going in that it was going to be an extremely physical game, given Houston's well-known style of play under head coach Kelvin Sampson. Scheyer called that early timeout, and he deserves a lot of credit for it because it worked. Duke might have been headed home if it hadn't worked. In the opening moments of this game, remember, Duke's senior guard, Jeremy Roach, clearly nervous and facing Houston's famously intense defensive pressure, fumbled the ball off his own body for one turnover in the first minute. Very soon after, Roach threw a wild cross-court pass, unlike anything he did all season that I can remember, over all of his teammates' heads and into press row for another quick and uncharacteristic turnover. Again, just in the first 2 minutes. Then sophomore point guard Tyrese Proctor misses a long three early in the shot clock rather than driving the ball into the lane, which is what Houston was doing on truly every possession early in the game. Meanwhile, time after time, the Cougars are attacking the basket in those opening minutes. Forward Juwan Roberts drives right past some soft Kyle Filipowski defense for a layup. Then the Cougars grabbed and converted an offensive rebound, out-muscling Duke's big guys in the process. Then the Cougars get an alley-oop for a thunderous dunk. And at that point, 6-0 Houston. The arena in Dallas, which is just a 3 or 4 hour drive from Houston, was rocking in all the right ways for the Cougars and all the wrong ways for the Blue Devils. Under Mike Krzyzewski, remember, Jon Scheyer's mentor and former coach, there was no greater sin than when his team either lacked toughness or failed to match or exceed the opponent's fight in a particular game. For 96 seconds against Houston, this year's Blue Devils were failing that essential test miserably, and Jon Scheyer knew it. He did call the timeout, and things changed quickly and dramatically. Filipowski not only showed more toughness, even through a bloody cheek and at one point literally spitting blood, he became the game's best player. Elite level skill usually does beat even the most physical opponents, and that is what Filipowski, who has a rare skill set in his 7-footer's body that's going to end up being an NBA lottery pick, ended up doing to the Cougars, who were plenty tough and physical but not nearly as skilled as the Devils. Filipowski ended up with a game-high 16 points and a game-high 9 rebounds, many of those in heavy traffic, and the Blue Devils needed every one of those points and rebounds. There aren't many 7-footers in college basketball who can shoot threes well, but Flip hit 3 of his 5 attempts from long range against Houston, including what turned out to be a kill shot of sorts in the final minutes. Those 3 threes represented 9 huge, almost impossible to defend points in a hard-fought game that the Blue Devils ended up winning by just 3. Meanwhile, Roach not only settled down after his nightmarish start, he went on to become Duke's second-best player against Houston, finishing with 14 points all in the second half, plus 3 rebounds and 3 assists, and playing a lot of the same physical, tough defense that has been the Blue Devils' trademark many, many times in recent decades. The Jeremy Roach of recent Duke losses to Carolina and State would have sent the Devils home against Houston. 1 year ago, Duke was ousted from the NCAA tournament in the second round, mainly because they got bullied by Tennessee, and they scored a season-low 52 points. As Shire said after the game this time, any question about his guys' mental toughness or their heart, he thought they answered those questions against Houston. Indeed, the Blue Devils are moving on, and Shire's early and very timely timeout went a long way toward making that happen. If you are anywhere near Wilmington, North Carolina, and looking for a little live music, a cold beer, a tangy slushie, a fun crowd, or just a taste of the good life at the beach, Jimmy's Bar in Wrightsville Beach is the place for you. Located on North Lumina Avenue, just 1 block from the sand and waves of the Atlantic Ocean, Jimmy's features a full bar with nightly beer and drink specials, and it hosts musical performers almost every day of the year. One more fun fact, Jimmy's annual Children's Bike Drive, which started in 2017, now distributes more than 1,000 bicycles and helmets per year to young people in the Wilmington area and beyond. Jimmy's Bar, your home away from home on Lumina Avenue in Wrightsville Beach. Quick thing number 2. Wins and losses do not get asterisks in the record books except in extremely unusual circumstances, and that is the way it should be. Injuries, whether to players on your favorite team or to somebody on your favorite team's opponents, are part of the game. Bad calls, whether they benefited your team in victory or doomed your team in defeat, are an absolutely inevitable part of the game. Whenever humans are involved, mistakes are going to happen. We would run out of asterisks very quickly if we slapped one on every example of one of those things. It must be mentioned, though, that Duke's very narrow victory came over a Houston team that was missing its by far best player for 2/3 of the game. Just as it would be ridiculous to suggest that the Blue Devils would have beaten the Cougars without Kyle Filipowski, Duke's first-team All-ACC standout and by far the Devils' most irreplaceable player, it would be absurd to suggest that Houston did not suffer greatly from the absence of superstar point guard Jamal Shead, who left the game late in the first half after playing only 13 minutes with that wicked-looking severe ankle sprain. Shead did return to the bench, but obviously not to the game. Shead was Houston's absolutely irreplaceable All-American and the heart and soul of the Cougars. He was the engine that made the Cougars' offense go, and that offense struggled badly without him, shooting only 41% from the field and 25% from three-point land. Shead also was, remember, the spearhead of the #1 defense in the entire country. Remember, he was the first player in Big 12 conference history to be named the league's player of the year, but also the league's defensive player of the year, even as a guy who's only a little bit taller than 6 feet. Offensively, the guy had a whopping 230 assists. That was among national leaders, and a 3-to-1 assist turnover ratio for the entire season, meaning he regularly made his teammates better, regularly gave them the kinds of open looks they didn't get often against Duke after his departure especially. And he minimized mistakes despite having the ball in his hands so frequently for the Cougars. On defense, it's probably not mere coincidence that Duke, after scoring only 23 points in the first half when Shead was playing, had 31 in the second half after Shead's injury. Again, Duke deserves a ton of credit for toughing out this victory. So there is no asterisk needed here. But it would have been great to see the fantastic players who started this great game get a chance to finish the game. College basketball fans tend to remember for decades, for their entire lifetime, when their favorite team lost a star player to injury before or during the big dance. But they tend to quickly forget when the same thing happens to one of their opponents. As Houston coach Kelvin Sampson said right after the game, with Jamal, it's a totally different story, but that's neither here nor there, is it? He added, sometimes that's just God's work. It just wasn't our time. The original Salt Works has become a legendary breakfast, brunch, and lunch place in Wilmington for both locals and out-of-town visitors over the last 50-plus years. Our good friend Bob Hubbard owns the place, but he's also the one cooking your food and often roaming the dining room to greet you with a smile and to make sure your visit is a great one. Bob has been running the show at this unique roadside diner for more than 20 years now, and he and his friendly, hardworking staff aim to treat you like one of their own. Try Bob's homemade omelets or special recipe grits for breakfast or his legendary cheeseburgers for lunch. The Original Salt Works, your breakfast and lunch choice on Oleander Drive in Wilmington. Quick thing number 3. This game matched two of the very best teams in the country, with both ranked in the national top 5, for example, of Ken Palm's efficiency rankings. There were very talented guys and very tough guys on both teams. Yet at the half, the score was Duke 23, Houston 22. And I did not feel like what I watched over those first 20 minutes resembled college basketball at its finest. At some point, when the college game gets too physical, it begins to look like a cross between football and basketball and mixed martial arts. And that is not good for the sport, the players, or the fans. I would have said the same thing regardless of which team won. I was thinking it before the game even ended. When the man who grabs the rebound was pushed from behind so hard that his momentum from the push makes him step on the baseline, the refs have to call a foul. That happened to Duke's veteran big man Ryan Young, who screamed for a foul on the play but was ignored, and instead he gets stuck with a turnover. Young, by the way, played an important role off the bench in that win over Houston when the Devils dearly needed another big body to deal with Houston's interior strength when there were some matchup problems against Duke's smaller guards. Similarly, when a player drives the baseline and gets hip-checked into the photographer's row, the refs must call the foul. In this game, they did not a few times. I realize and accept that not all physical contact is a foul. I know the rules after 37 years of covering this stuff. I'm also aware that the refs get criticized if they blow their whistles too often, because that can make the game flow choppy, and sometimes too many players end up in foul trouble, which can limit their playing time or even disqualify them. So then the refs get criticized for that. I do not envy their task here. I also do understand, though, the concept of advantage, disadvantage, and I am thankful for my many referee friends who have explained the intricacies of their craft to me over these last 3 decades or so. But this Duke-Houston game, while thrilling and down to the wire, could have and should have been even better. When too much physical contact goes uncalled, it's bad for the players, bad for the fans, and bad for the college game. Credit again to the Duke Blue Devils for posting a huge victory despite their season-low 54 points this time, for knocking out a #1 seed, and for heading back to the Elite 8. I just hope it looks more like college basketball again when the Devils take on the Wolfpack on Sunday. I'm David Glenn. Thanks for joining us on the North Carolina Sports Network. Please find more of our work at ncsportsnetwork.com.
This is the moment we waited for. Everything you want is right here. We gon' give them what they came for. We gon' take it up from last year. Shoot on my shot, boy, I'm long range. Me and the team on the same thing. Stayed down, never switched up. Only thing changed was the game. I'm in the zone now. Let the catch change what we on now. When I pull up, know it's going down. Foot on the